My brother-in-law called me the other day and asked me if I'd like some mowers that his dad was wanting to get rid of to make space in their shed. Being the person that I am, I of course said yes, and we made plans to meet up. Now, the first time I saw this mower, I was taken back by how strange it looked and soon realized I was looking at a time capsule that unfortunately should have stayed closed. In today's video, we look at this old Toro mower, and the problem is that I don't have any information about it. That of course means I don't know if it starts and runs or if it might have any issues. So unfortunately, you're going to get to see what happens in this sort of situation. Now, there may be a good chance that you might end up with a boat anchor, but it also means that there's a bit of a thrill all at the same time. Now, I'm going to try and repair this mower, however, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, we're only going to mention what these other options could be. We don't have enough time to look into them, but if you need more information on these options, you're welcome to ask as many questions as you need to. The first thing I want to do is look it over and see if there's anything obviously wrong with it, but as usual, I don't see anything terribly wrong. Now, since it was stored in a shed, there might be a slim chance that it was prepped for storage, however, there are no guarantees. On this older style of fuel cap, this silver bell is part of the venting system. If the bell is gone, it's about the same thing as putting your hand over the opening. This won't allow any air to get into the tank, which will then keep fuel from leaving it. If your mower acts like it's running out of fuel a few minutes after starting it, check your fuel cap. Now, the biggest concern for any engine is whether or not it has the proper amount of oil in it. When checking the oil, make sure you wipe the dipstick clean first, and that way you'll get an accurate reading. Fortunately, it looks like the oil is just shy of the full mark, and it also is fairly clean. Since there's plenty of oil, and after making sure the engine wasn't stuck, I think it's time to test if the engine will start after we put some fuel into the carb's throat. Luckily, it started and ran for a few seconds, which is great news. It means the engine is not worn out and it also has a working ignition system. There was also a large puff of blue smoke out of the muffler, which is not a good sign because it could mean that either the rings are worn out or there's too much oil in the engine. Well, we know it doesn't have too much oil, so let's hope the rings are fine. Unfortunately, we won't know until we get it running. Another way to get an idea if the engine is burning oil is based on how the spark plug looks. If it's wet with fuel, it would make sense, but if it was wet with oil, we might be in trouble. Unfortunately, it looks like the plug was recently changed, so I can't get a history on how the engine was running. Also, I think this is fuel that's on it from me putting too much into the carb for the test. Either way, I still won't know until we get it started. For the time being, I'm going to put the spark plug back in and replace it later on if the engine turns out to be good. I'm also not going to put the air filter back on because I intend on giving this mower a light cleaning and I don't want to get it wet. I also noticed that the fuel line looks to be completely petrified, most likely because of the type of fuel they were using in this mower. Even if I don't have to touch the carb, I think I'm going to replace the fuel line because I think it could leak at some point and cause issues later on. The underside of the mowing deck looks to be in really good condition, just a film of dirt on it, along with some cobwebs and an egg sac. Not that it really matters or that it really needs it, but I would like to see if we can get it a bit cleaner. The only problem though is the deck material. Since most of the paint has come off, there's now a rough texture to the material. It's also really hard to remove the dirt, even with a cleaner and a brush. It might help to use a pressure washer, but because of the rough texture, the pressure washer isn't going to get everything off either. I guess I'm just going to have to leave it the way it is. Now, there's not a lot of dirt or oil on top of the mower either, but I do want this mower to at least look clean when I do decide to get rid of it. Unfortunately, I may be jinxing myself with those words. The least I can do is wash away any loose dirt, that way it'll be nicer to film. Now, with the paint wet, it looks really good. However, if I speed the video up, you'll soon start to realize that the paint is faded and has no shine to it whatsoever. To take care of it, I'm going to spray a shining agent on the paint that will make it look good for a very long time. It's not a permanent fix, but it works really well. Besides, if you wanted your paint to look good, go buy a brand new mower and don't expect a used mower to be in pristine condition. Unfortunately, after applying the agent, I'm going to have to leave it alone for quite some time, and besides that, I'm losing sunlight, so I'll pick this back up tomorrow. Now, you're welcome to ask what I'm using, but you can find many products just like this one at every local big box store, so all you need to do is go take a look around. So it's the next day. I'm going to start by removing the fuel jet out of the bowl and see what kind of condition it's in. Based on what I see, I can then decide if I need to remove the bowl for more inspection. Unfortunately, it looks like there's quite a bit of buildup on the jet, which means it's not going to look good inside the bowl either. Of course, that means I need to remove the bowl, but it seems to be stuck, which is not a good sign. Now I could try and pry the bowl off the carb, but since the jet was in poor shape and the bowl was stuck, I'm going to inspect the carb as well, so I might as well take the carb off the engine. This will also give me the opportunity to remove and replace the fuel line as well. Since the fuel line is hard as a rock, taking it off is going to be a bit challenging, so to help it out, I'm going to carefully cut the end of the fuel line near the carb, and if that doesn't work, I'll have to cut the line into 2 pieces. After that, we just need to remove the bolts and then carefully disconnect any linkages to it. Now, because the clearance is a bit tight, I would recommend using a smaller drive set, but this larger one does fit. The only problem is when installing the bolts. If you're not careful, you could easily install them crooked and damage the threads in the engine. Now, the choke linkage is only a thin wire and it came off pretty easily, which only leaves us the governor linkage to deal with. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen a carb like this with a fuel adjustment screw. The reason it's unique is because you can fine-tune the fuel delivery. If all possible, I would like to keep this original carb because they simply don't make them like this anymore. Unfortunately, even with the carb off the engine, I still can't remove the bowl. I really don't want to resort to prying on it, but I really don't have a choice. After finally getting the bowl loose, I soon realized why the bowl was stuck to the carb. When gasoline dries up inside a carb, it will sometimes turn into a sticky varnish which can clog up all the tiny passages and require either a lot of carb cleaner or a hot bath and an ultrasonic cleaner to get rid of the varnish. Now, the bowl gasket was also stuck, and to be able to clean it without the carb cleaner destroying it, I want to remove it. Unfortunately, the gasket had other plans, and Sue decided to break apart. Now, this is a huge issue for me because buying the correct gasket is not cheap, and I'll have to wait for it to come in. To make matters worse, the float is not sitting correctly in the carb. The float should be sitting parallel with the area where the gasket sits, but using my screwdriver, you can see it's not. For a better visual, I'll overlay the images so you'll make it easier to tell. Now, even though it's pretty close, through experience, this is not good enough, and there's an increased chance for issues later on. The reason this is important is that it tells me that the needle seat is closed up and will no longer allow enough fuel to flow into the carb, and that might also not seal like it's supposed to, causing the carb to leak. After removing the float and needle, you can see the seat in its opening, and what I see is a very small opening in the seat as compared to what it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, this means we need to replace the seat. So here's the issue I'm having. When I find a carb that needs a seat to be replaced, I typically just order a new carb, but I really want to save this carb. However, I also need to get a new bowl gasket too, which means this carb needs more parts, which of course means more money. The third strike against this carb is the condition it's in. Now, it's not the worst carb I've ever seen, but in the condition it's in, it's going to require more cleaning than usual, and there's a good possibility of it needing multiple cleanings, requiring it to be removed multiple times from the engine. Unfortunately, I can't risk putting in new parts and only having a slim chance of it working like it should. That means I'm considering replacing the carb, but I'm going to run into another situation, which is cost. The parts I need to fix this one only cost about $7, which sounds great, but it will have about a 15% chance of working correctly. That means I should go with an OEM carb, right? But at $70 before shipping, that's highway robbery. Now, I can find aftermarket carbs, and even though it's only $20, it'll take over 1 month to get here, which is an absolutely insane waiting period. So now I have to decide what plan I should go with. Replace the parts for this carb, go with an OEM carb, or wait till Customs releases my order from a dock with trucks that aren't going anywhere. The worst part is that I don't know the health of this engine. At least I know it works, but I really need to get my propane kit set up. That way I'll be able to test engines out without going through the hassle of getting new parts. Just on the off chance that I decide to replace the parts I need for this carb, I'm going to do a very light cleaning on it and then put it back together. That way I can keep this carb intact and I can rebuild it or use it for parts later on. If I get a chance later in the season, I like to rebuild it even with its slim chance for success. In the end, at least we know this engine does work, and we also got it looking 10 times better than before. It's a shame that there are places where the paint is missing, but it seems like it happens a lot on this style of deck. There's really not much we can do about it without stripping it and repainting it. Another option when it comes to dealing with this carb is replacing it with a more modern carb. However, there will be a couple of hurdles we'll have to clear for it to work correctly, which mainly deals with the choke and governor linkages. So my question is, which direction would you like me to go with this project? Trying to use this carb with new parts, adapting a newer style of carb, ordering an aftermarket carb but waiting till Christmas, or get a loan so I can pay for an OEM carb? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.